An old man walked into a restaurant with his dog. No one knew his name. No one cared he was once a veteran. They only saw a stranger and a dog in camo gear. 10 minutes later, he was thrown outright in front of everyone. No questions, no ID checks. No one cared how many lives he'd saved. 2 hours later, 5 Marines in uniform walked in. They weren't there to eat. They came to correct a mistake the whole restaurant had silently witnessed. And when they held up a photo, no one in that room could look at the door again. Because the man they kicked out wasn't just an old guy with a dog. He was a veteran. A true hero. This isn't just a story. This is one of thousands of veteran stories that Justice for Veterans is committed to telling. Because honor has no expiration date. His name is Frank Delaney, former U.S. Marine. 62 years old. He survived 3 ambushes and 1 explosion that wiped out nearly his entire squad. But what haunts Frank the most is coming home. No more gunfire. No one called him captain anymore. Only panic attacks in the night, and the breathing of a very special friend. His name is Max, a Malinois trained not just to protect but to heal. Max can sense a panic episode before Frank even feels it. He pushes Frank's head down when the tremors start. He licks his hand when he gasps for breath. No one understands Frank like Max, and no one understands Max except Frank. They're not just friends. They're 2 old warriors surviving through each other. It was a lightly sunny noon in a seaside town. Frank walked slowly with Max along the main street this limp clear, while Max stayed close, like a shadow. They stopped at a small restaurant called Blue Water Grill. Frank nodded and whispered, "Back corner, like always, Max." Inside, he gently wiped Max's paws with a cloth he brought. Max curled silently beneath the table, eyes following Frank's every move. A young waitress named Emily smiled and handed him a menu, asking no questions. Everything seemed normal until a man in a blue shirt walked over. His voice was cold as steel. "Sorry, we don't allow dogs inside." Frank looked up politely. "This is a service dog. I have full documentation." He held out a small plastic wallet inside, a green certification card showing Max's photo and the words, "Service Animal, PTSD Certified." The manager glanced at it but didn't touch it. His voice remained flat. "We have a policy. Other customers won't feel comfortable." An older woman nearby chimed in, "A dog's still a dog. I don't want it near my food." Frank said nothing. Max lifted his head, ears folding back, sensing the shift. A silent tension spread. No one spoke up. No one asked why. The manager stood firm, arms crossed. "Sir, I'll have to ask you to leave, or I'll call security." Frank didn't argue. He rose, slowly slipping the certificate back into his pocket. Max stood up immediately, needing no command. The sound of the wooden chair scraping the floor cut through the hushed room. A few glanced over, a few shook their heads, some whispered behind napkins. No one said, "He's right." No one asked him to stay. Max walked tightly beside Frank, tail down, eyes quietly asking, "Again?" Frank paused at the door. He turned to glance at the empty table. That quiet corner now felt cold. Then he pushed the door open and stepped out, never looking back. The sun still shone on the street, but inside, only one thought echoed in his mind. "I'm no longer welcome. Not even in the country I fought for." Frank stepped out of the restaurant, the late afternoon sun casting light across his faded shirt. Max walked beside him, shoulder to knee, like every time they retreated from a place that didn't welcome them. Across the street, a group of college students sat laughing. One, wearing a backward cap, raised his brows. "Look, T, I cosplay with his dog." Laughter erupted. Another lifted his phone, filming. The caption read, "Crazy old PTSD vet wants medals for his mutt." No one stopped them. No one said, "That's enough." Max glanced over, unblinking, ears low. He didn't bark, but he moved subtly in front of Frank. Frank stopped, not angry, just sighed. His eyes were quiet, as if this kind of wound was familiar. And as the phone flashed again, he murmured, "All it takes is a few likes, and disrespect becomes entertainment." Max gently nudged his muzzle into Frank's hand as if to say, "Keep walking." Frank sat on a park bench. Max lay beside him, head resting on his knee. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, pulling him back in time. It was Kandahar. The ambush struck without warning gunfire, explosions shaking the dust-thick air. Frank was blown off his feet, motionless in dirt and blood. His vision blurred, but he saw a shadow rush embarking, grabbing his vest, dragging him away from a second blast zone. It was Max. No fear, no command, only instinct to protect. Frank woke in a medic, tenth leg badly injured, and Max had shrapnel lodged in his shoulder. They survived together and never separated again. Frank looked at Max' now graying muzzle, old scars. He gently stroked his head. "You've always saved me, on the battlefield, and here." A soft breeze drifted through the park. Leaves landed near Frank's shoes. He rummaged through his bag and pulled out a now cold sandwich. No one noticed the old man and his dog on the worn bench. Among the crowd, they blended into the background of the world. Frank broke the sandwich in two, handing half to Max. The dog didn't eat right away. He looked up at Frank, waiting for permission. "Go ahead, warrior," Frank whispered. His hand trembled slightly. His eyes stared into the vague distance where memories and reality blurred. Frank pulled a crumpled photo from his wallet. A young soldier with fierce eyes, standing beside Max mid-camp, amid smoke and fire. "They raised flags for us, shook our hands when we came back, but then—" Frank paused. "Kicked out again, huh, Max?" Max licked his hand. No bark, just quiet, understanding the kind, forged only in battle and survival. 2 hours later, Blue Water Grill buzzed as if nothing had happened. Clinking silverware, jazz music, casual chatter. No one mentioned the old man with the dog. Then, the door opened. 5 U.S. Marines stepped in, dress uniforms crisp, shoes gleaming, faces cold, not angry, not smiling. At the front was Captain Harris, gold medal on his chest, eyes sweeping the room. The restaurant's noise thinned, fell silent. Every eye turned toward them. No one knew what was happening. A staff member stepped up to greet them, but Captain Harris raised his hand. "We're not here for dinner." He pulled a photo from his breast pocket. It was old, but clear. Frank and Max, covered in mud, standing in a war zone. "We're here for a fellow Marine, and for a 4-legged warrior who was just kicked out of this place." Captain Harris laid the photo on the counter, turning to face everyone in the restaurant. Frank Delaney is not just an old man with a dog. He once saved 7 lives, including Minnie in an ambush in Kandahar. A wave of silence swept across the room. No clinking cutlery, no whispers. "And the pet you called a dog." He pulled out a small medal. "His name is Sergeant Max, awarded an honorary rank for saving lives in combat. Wounded, but never left his post, not once." A waiter dropped a glass. A woman gasped, clutching her chest. Captain Harris looked directly at the manager. "You don't need to know where someone served to treat them with basic respect." One last photo was pinned to the restaurant's bulletin board. Frank and Max standing side by side, the American flag waving behind them. Below, handwritten in ink, "Brother, never forgotten." The air inside the restaurant grew heavy. No one ate. No one touched their plates. A young man pulled out his phone, filming the newly posted photo. They kicked out a veteran and a service dog. Not knowing they were a war hero, he muttered, tapping post. A woman whispered, "Oh God, I saw him leave. I didn't do anything." The manager stepped forward, voice rushed. I didn't know. I just..." Captain Harris gave him one last look. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to be human." Before they left, one Marine taped a cardboard sign to the restaurant window. A photo of Max looking ahead. Beneath it read, "We don't abandon each other. Not people, not dogs." The door shut behind them, but all eyes stayed on it. And online, hundreds of shares had already begun. That evening, Frank and Max were still sitting on their old park bench. The wind stirred gently, the sun tilting west. A pair of women's shoes stopped in front of them. Frank looked up. It was Emily, the young waitress, holding a carefully wrapped takeout box, her hands trembling slightly. No uniform, no name tag, just a young woman, with eyes full of worry and regret. I brought the lunch you ordered earlier, and some extra bacon for Max. She placed the box down, then pulled out a small folded paper napkin. Frank said nothing. He looked at Max. Max looked back, silent, still. Emily bowed her head, voice soft. I stood there, and I said nothing. I know that was wrong, and I'm sorry. She turned away quickly as if she'd cry if she stayed a second longer. Frank opened the note. Only one line, scribbled without a name, without a signature. Next time, I won't stay silent. A week later, in front of the Blue Water Grill, a new sign had been placed beneath the old logo. We welcome veterans and their service, animals with full respect. Inside, near the host stand, a framed photo of Frank and Max stood proudly. Beside it, a sealed envelope labeled, "To Mr. Delaney, from someone who was wrong." Frank opened the letter while sitting on his porch. It was handwritten by Mr. Kramer, the former restaurant manager. No law ever taught me what you and Max did. Respect doesn't require documents, it requires eyes that see people with a human heart. He had resigned and proposed hosting the town's first ADA training session. A nearby high school sent Frank a bundle of handmade cards. Students had written, "Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not giving up. Max is the coolest hero we've ever known." Frank smiled faintly, and Max just yawned and laid his head on Frank's leg like always. Near the back of Blue Water Grill, where Frank was once turned away, now sat a small table near the wall. Above it hung a folded American flag and a wooden plaque engraved, "Frank, Max, Bravo Team, never forgotten." Every Friday morning, Frank dropped by, sitting in his old seat. Max lay at his feet, eyes alert though dimmed by age. A new staff member poured coffee, nodding gently. "Good morning, Sergeant Max." Frank smiled softly, but enough to warm the room. That day, a loud motorcycle revved on the street. Max immediately lifted his head, leaning into Frank. Frank patted him and said with a deep voice, "Still not retired, huh, old friend?" The college student, who once filmed them, had returned too. He apologized, then deleted the video. "My brother just enlisted. Now I understand." Frank simply nodded, not angry. Max wagged his tail once like forgiveness, subtle as a blink. On the old wooden porch, Frank sat still, eyes toward a pale red sunset. Beside him, Max was sleeping, head resting on Frank's leg, breathing steady like that day in the medic tent. They didn't need many words, because those who once shared water and battle understand each other through silence. But there are things we must not stay silent about, because there are people like Frank, forgotten in the very land they once fought to protect, and those like Max, not pets, but soldiers, companions, symbols of loyalty that society still has yet to learn. Today, they live in peace, but not everyone is that lucky. Many veterans sleep on the streets. Many other Maxes are denied the right to serve. Many heroes are still treated like shadows. Justice for veterans doesn't tell stories to move you. We tell them to remind you. Honor has no expiration, and respect doesn't need a reason. If you've ever witnessed injustice against those who served, speak up, or simply share this story. Write in the comments, "I choose justice for veterans." And if you want to hear more stories like Frank, Max, follow the channel. We'll keep telling them because they deserve to be remembered.